do this. Slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay. So here we are. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Eric Owens, who is my business partner, and I are really excited to be here to introduce you to a really kind of emerging huge topic these days in science and fitness, and it relates to the myofascial system, which is what we specialize in. You'll notice here that we have the Delos Institute as part of the presentation. We're really excited to launch this institute to offer more coursework on the topic of the myofascial system and also all things business. And the purpose of today is to introduce you to some new ideas, and hopefully those ideas are going to help you in becoming more effective as a fitness professional. And then we'll give you a taste of kind of what other things to expect from the Delos Institute. So this is sort of the agenda for today, where the massive portion of the conversation really is focused on how the myofascial system can affect some of the work that you're doing, some new things to introduce to you. And then we will wrap up with just a little bit of a business discussion and upcoming classes, and we'll do a Q&A. Eric and I started Delos Therapy back in 2012, but we actually met as teenagers at the Olympic Training Center for table tennis. So we're both professional table tennis players. And at that time, as teenagers, we joked about starting a company, Delos Therapy, because Eric's father, who developed this therapy, had such immense success because it was so innovative, and Eric just wanted to continue that legacy, and his interest was really in science and medicine. So we joked that he would go off to pursue science and medicine, and I would go off to study business and figure out how to start a company. So my education is on the business side. And throughout the years, we've had the pleasure of working with a lot of fitness professionals in the industry. So we decided to develop this Delos Institute to really bring our knowledge and background and expertise from the myofascial science perspective and also from the business perspective into an institute that offers courses specifically designed for wellness and fitness professionals. So I will pass it off to Eric to get started on the main topic.
Great, thank you. It's rare that two teenagers get to come together and plan a company 25 years later, and as a joke, and then it actually comes into fruition. So it's been a wild ride, and here we are. But thank you guys, thank you for your time. We hope that some of this information you find useful to make your fitness professional career more successful, translate the information to your clients so that everybody can learn. Today we're really focusing on all things fascia. So we'll get into some of the research, we'll get into some of the anatomy, we'll get into the changes that happen whenever we're strength training or stretching. But let's start with the very basics of anatomy. Anytime I ask a fitness professional what fascia is or what connective tissue is, the general answer I get is just, oh, it's that wrapping around a muscle. And that's true, but it's so much more than that. And I know in medical school, what's interesting is whenever we did medical dissections in anatomy class, the very first thing we did is we dissect away this sort of irritating substance that's blocking our view of the important structures. Well, it turns out that substance is actually incredibly important, but it's taking many, many years for the research to actually come out and show that it's far more than just a connective tissue covering. It has nerves in it. It's sending information to and away from the brain to tell you how you feel. If you're feeling stiff, if you're feeling limited in range of motion, if you're feeling powerful, all of these and the changes that happens when you stretch and whenever you load the tissue. These are dynamic changes that are happening all of the time. So I think it's important, before we get into that, let's take a step back and just talk about the anatomy of fascia. So next slide, maybe. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the top, right? So this is the top layer. We see some hair there. We look at the skin, okay? So directly below the skin, we have some subcutaneous fat. Right below there, so we haven't even gotten to the muscle yet, we have our first layer of fascia. So skin, fat, and a layer of fascia that sort of compresses the fat up against the skin and holds it in place. That layer is called the superficial fascia. What's very interesting about that particular part of the fascia, or that plane, is that's where it houses a lot of nerves. So if you're feeling stiff, if you're feeling limited in your range of motion, if you're feeling some type of weakness or pain, those nerves are actually in that area, sending that information to your brain. It's highly neurological. It's not just connective tissue, it's a neurological system that's sending that information. And there's so much research coming out that's really mind-blowing of how the neurological system, how complex it is and how important it is. As we dive a little bit deeper, there's another small layer of fat, and then we get to another layer of fascia called the Fascial Profundus. Now that layer actually envelops the entire body. Again, we haven't even gotten to the muscle yet. There are 2 layers of fascia above the muscle. Now, what's important from my perspective is those 2 layers can get stuck together. There's actually a layer of water in between these layers, because whenever we move, if we move with fluidity and we're moving in 3 dimensions, our muscles need to be able to slide and glide, and the tissue needs to be able to slide and glide. But what happens is if we get dehydrated, or there's some inflammation, or we're immobile for a particular length of time, those layers can get stuck together and we can get an adhesion between those layers. So what do you think it will feel like whenever these layers can't slide and glide, whenever they're stuck? If you're moving through a particular range of motion, but it just doesn't feel right at a sticking point, is something that I hear. It's because these layers are actually stuck together and they're not sliding and gliding. So how do we get rid of that, right? We talk in great detail, especially in our classes, about how important movement is and hydration, because we want to create lubrication between these layers. Now, if we dive a little bit deeper, we actually finally get to the muscle tissue. And next slide, please. Yeah, so we get to the muscle. So remember, there's the superficial fascia, there's the fascia profundus directly below that. Now we get to the muscle. So this is the connective tissue that everyone talks about that surrounds a muscle. So yes, that is true. And then you have connective tissue that actually dives deep into the muscle. So let's take it backwards. I think you guys will have a better appreciation of how complex these structures are. So if you take one muscle cell, a myofiber, whatever you would like to call it, and you wrap that muscle cell in connective tissue or fascia, that's called the endomysium. Now, if you take about 60 or 70 of these individual muscle cells, rather than them just being scattered around on your body, you need something to hold that together. So put 60 or 70 muscle cells, and you need a covering. That covering is actually called a perimysium. So those cells wrapped in perimysium, that is collectively known as a muscle fascicle. So you put a bunch of these tubes of fascicles together, again, they'll be sliding and going in all these different directions. To hold those together, we need a wrapping. That wrapping is on the outside of a muscle. That is called the epimysium. So we have the endomysium around each individual muscle fiber. We put a group of those together. We have a structure collectively known as a fascicle. We wrap that in perimysium. We put all of those together and we wrap that in a cover, and we call that the epimysium. So that is actually the anatomy of a muscle fiber, a gross muscle in its natural state. Now, whenever these fascicles, these tubes inside the muscle, they're supposed to be able to move in all of these different directions very dynamically. That allows for fluid movement. We know for sure, all of the research is showing these fascicles, the tissue around the fascicle and in between, become densely fibrotic, meaning they don't slide and glide past each other. This is happening inside of the muscle. Now, we can try to stretch this all we want. None of that is actually moving. These muscle fascicles that are stuck together need to be forced apart with some type of pressure technique. And so what I really want you guys to take home is that connective tissue is not simply just a wrapping around a muscle. It actually goes around every muscle fiber, every muscle fascicle. It goes around every gross muscle. There are layers above the muscle, and it actually goes into your organs, and it goes into your bones, and it goes into your joints. And one could argue that the constituents of fascia, it's really made of collagen. What are tendons and bones made of? They're actually made of collagen, but there's more minerals, more calcium, for example, that makes a bone. But a lot of the researchers are saying this is one continuum of connective tissue that's connecting everything. So next slide, please. Great, so now we have a basics of anatomy. So let's talk about the effects of stretching. This research is really interesting. It's coming out of Harvard and some out of the NIH, where what the researchers wanted to show is now that we know a little bit more about anatomy, what's actually happening when we stretch the anatomy. You ask a yoga instructor, a Pilates instructor, what's actually happening when you stretch? And commonly you'll just, oh, the muscles are pulling apart. That's true, but there's so much more happening than just muscle tissue moving, right? There's all kinds of neurological elements, and we take a deep dive into this with our classes. But I wanted to pick one slide that I found particularly interesting. So they took a rat in this model, and they actually did a side bend. So you can see on the rat, there's one side that's extended or elongated, and then the left side is a little bit shortened or condensed. And they wanted to look at the cells to see how they responded. So they looked at a cell type called a fibroblast. A fibroblast is the cell type that produces collagen. So your collagen and your fascia are full of fibroblasts, and anytime you move, a fibroblast will lay down collagen in the line of force. That's how your body develops muscle memory, and that's how you develop good fluid mechanics whenever you do something over and over and over. But they wanted to see what would happen to the fibroblasts whenever we stretch. So what they found interesting is that fibroblasts have a very distinct shape. Whenever you put some force, some stress and strain, the fibroblasts change shape. So they are absolutely adapting to that stress being put on the body. On the shortened side, the fibroblasts didn't change at all. So there was no stress really put on the shorter side, but on the side that we're stretching, we're pulling it apart, there's a stress and strain. And they noticed that the fibroblast metabolic activity grew. They grew tremendously in size. And so they were thinking, well, why does that happen? And what they found is that we have this sort of cytoskeleton all through the fascia, these connections that are going everywhere that hold our muscle tissue together. The fibroblasts are sort of embedded in there, producing collagen to keep that skeleton together. And they're always grabbing a hold of and maintaining touch with that skeleton to hold your muscle tissue together so you can get force to transmit through the muscle. Now, in a time of injury, what you'll notice is that you swell, right? It's very common. You twist an ankle, you sprain a knee, you get some swelling in there. What's actually happening is such trauma that's very fast, the fibroblasts that are reaching out at these connective tissue proteins, collagen, it disrupts it. So as soon as it disrupts it and they can no longer hold on, water flows into that tissue, and that's what causes the swelling. But that doesn't happen during strength training and stretching. What happens is, instead of allowing swelling to go into the tissue and causing inflammation, what happens is the fibroblasts actually grow in size. They reach out, they grab a hold of the cytoskeleton, they lay down collagen so that that movement moving forward is now more efficient. Think of these collagen fibers like tracks. So whenever you do something, your body is responding, and the fibroblasts will lay down collagen in that area so it forms a track. So the next time you do that movement, there's a track of collagen laid down. So that movement is so much more efficient. And this is happening whenever we stretch. Your body is adapting in real time. And they actually did a few studies where they did very quick stretches at 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and 30-minute holds. And they found the metabolic response for the fibroblast happens within seconds. It's very, very fast. The fibroblasts respond right away. And they didn't notice much of a change with longer holds. So it's kind of an interesting, because a lot of people say we should hold the stretch for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So far, the research hasn't necessarily supported that a short stretch is actually pretty effective. And maybe next slide. So now let's move from stretching. Let's talk about some of the fascial adaptations with strength training. I do a lot of strength training. I think strength training is fantastic. And the adaptations I believe are really, really fascinating. This was a really, really cool study where the fascial researchers examined fascial tissue that's a little bit more mineralized. It's a ligament, ACL. And what they wanted to know, because traditionally people know when you work out, your muscles grow. When you don't work out, your muscles atrophy. That's pretty common knowledge. But most people don't know that tendons respond to strain, ligaments respond to strain, or load rather. And so this group of researchers, what they did is they took a group of professional women's soccer players and they looked at their ACLs pre and post season. So they did an MRI preseason, they did an MRI postseason, and the findings were fascinating. And so what they found, let's take the image on the right. The image on the right is a very thick ACL. That is after a full season of soccer. And the ACL is thick and it's been under tremendous wear and tear for 8 months. They've been strength training, they've been running, they've been competing. And so that tissue is really, really strong. And the off season, they took it easy at recovery. They weren't training very hard. They took an MRI at the preseason, they looked at the MRI, and the ACL atrophy, it got smaller. Now, a lot of these girls were very excited about the season starting, and they went out and they're aggressively weight training, aggressively, doing some friendly competitions and running around. And the amount of blown out ACLs is something that they'd never seen before. And they could not understand why. So this was a retroactive study where they were like, why are so many of these professional soccer players blowing out their ACLs? And what they found is that they weren't capable of bearing the load. They were capable halfway or at the end of the season. But if you let an ACL atrophy a little bit, and now you expect it to be able to hold on to those demands, the tissue just doesn't respond that way. And then we've seen this over the last couple of years. We've seen this a few times. There was an NFL lockout not too long ago where the players were not competing. And I believe, and the researcher was saying, whenever they started competing, there was a 12-fold increase in Achilles rupture tears. These guys are having an atrophied Achilles, and they're going out and they're sprinting and they're hard charging and they're rupturing their Achilles. This happened during COVID. Because some of the European soccer players that were having the same thing, the ACLs and the Achilles, whenever they weren't competing, they atrophied a little bit. And then they were called upon, okay, COVID's over, we're going to go play a game. They go out and play a game, and within, I think, a few minutes of one of the professional European leagues, there were like 4 or 5 blown out ACLs and Achilles tendons. So this shows you that not just muscle changes, but ligaments and tendon change and adapt to the load that we put upon them. So be very careful. If you go through a period of time, if you're not working out, don't charge right into it right away, because you could tear something. You want to be a little bit slow and progressive and get some of those load adaptations in the tissue. So let's move on to something more myofascial related. So we just looked at the ACL. Now we're going to focus on what happens inside muscle tissue. So a lot of people know you work out, your muscles grow, it's called hypertrophy, and you get stronger. But what's actually happening? What's another angle? What's another thing that we can talk about with our clients besides all the muscles grow, or you increase the fiber content, or actin and myosin? I feel like you guys know a lot of that. But did you know that collagen actually becomes synthesized at tremendous amounts inside the myofascial tissue? That anytime we load a muscle, the amount of collagen that gets inputted to that tissue is tremendous. And so this was an interesting study where they looked at 2 different components. They looked at the amount of collagen content with eccentric and concentric movements, so shortening and lengthening movements. And they also looked at the enzyme. The enzyme is called lysyl oxidase that cross-links the collagen together. These cross-linking, it forms like a rigid structure in the muscle that allows force to transmit through the muscle. So lysyl oxidase is a very, very important enzyme. And what they found when they looked at the tendon, they found a 3-fold increase in the amount of collagen in the tendon as a response to concentric and eccentric training. So your tendons absolutely get stronger and thicker, and that's what you want. When we look at muscle tissue, it's a little bit different. I found it interesting that there was a 3-fold increase in concentric movements, but a 10-fold increase in eccentric movements. So the elongation, it was more metabolically challenging. It's more damaging in a good way to elongate tissue very strong. And the load adaptations was 10 times more collagen put into the tissue. So the question is, why does this matter? So what the researchers did is they said, okay, well, why are we getting, sorry, I got a call there. Hopefully I'm still on. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So the researchers wanted to know, what's happening? Why is the body putting 10 times more collagen into tissue? And so they did a really clever experiment where they inhibited this enzyme lysyl oxidase that's important for this cross-linking of collagen. So that collagen couldn't go into the tissue. So they did a normal strength training regimen. They inhibited this enzyme, and they wanted to see what would happen. It had no effect on muscle hypertrophy. So the muscle still grew, but there was a 50% attenuation of strength, meaning a 50% decrease in strength. And that is really, really powerful information. And what that shows is when you get stronger, it's actually due to collagen synthesis in that muscle, forming that rigid structure so that force can go through the muscle. It's not just muscle fibers going in there, it's actually collagen synthesis happening. And when you inhibit that, there's very little change in strength. You'll get growth, but you won't get strength. And I think that is really important to show that having healthy collagen is so important. And in our classes, we talk about some collagen supplements and why those are important. We talk about how collagen can actually become fibrotic and dense, and it doesn't allow force transmission through the muscle. So a muscle can grow, but think about the collagen in there becoming very disorganized. And when you understand it's all embedded deeply in that web inside of a muscle, it makes sense foam rolling across the top of that tissue and massaging across the tissue. It's fine, but it's really superficial. These fibrotic bundles are buried deep inside that tissue in these abstract patterns. They require pressure. They not only require pressure, but they require pressure from multiple angles to reorient that collagen so that we can get good force transmission through the tissue. And next slide, please. So yeah, so let's talk about some of the current research. I mean, we've covered a lot of it. So really what the hot topic that's coming out is, what are the anatomical findings, right? Connective tissue or fascia is way more than just this wrapping around the muscle. So what are the neurological components? What are the nerves that are associated? What are the neurological receptors? There are so many receptors that they're finding that all have various effects based on if we're stretching or if we're foam rolling or if we're icing or if we're putting heat on it or we're doing some type of vibration. They all have a very unique and different response. So a lot of research is going to anatomy. A ton of research is happening in the field of stretching and strength training. These adaptations to this stress of stretching and strength training are very interesting. And the adaptations are real. We can actually verify them. These are being verified with muscle biopsies and MRIs to show, here's actually what's happening when you stretch tissue. Here's actually what happens when you run or when you strength train. And when we know the functional deficits of our clients, when we understand the anatomy and what they're going through, we now have the tools to be able to recommend the proper treatment protocol and the proper recovery protocol, because we have more powerful command over the anatomy. And I think that is really powerful, is when we know all of the variables of what's happening in the anatomy. We know what's happening with stretching. We know what's happening with strength training. And we see these functional deficits with clients. We can say, oh, you know what? I think you need a little bit more of this and a little bit less of this. And here's why. And I think this is really great and powerful to be able to help yourself in your own training, but to also help your clients. So one exciting thing that we want to talk about, I talked about a little bit in the breakout session, is a unique myofascial tool that we're coming out with called the gumdrop. And, you know, a lot of you guys I think foam rolling is pretty common. I mean, you look in a gym, they are absolutely everywhere. And if you read the instructions, I've been following this for a very long time. You look at the instructions of a foam roller, they've evolved over time. A lot of them will say to apply pressure and to hold for a few seconds. I find that very interesting, because I've always thought rolling across a tissue, once I understood the anatomy, rolling across the tissue didn't make any sense to me, especially when it's so deep and it needs pressure to force that tissue to separate. And so I loved it when I started reading the instructions of foam rollers saying, well, hold pressure for 3 seconds and then move to the next spot. And then the next evolution of foam rollers have those little nubs on them to focus the pressure. So everything is getting there. I feel like, you know, we're 10 years ahead, and sometimes it can be a little bit frustrating. But what's powerful about this tool is the asymmetrical design and the different size tips, because you know there are different size muscles. If you're a 250-pound bodybuilder or an older lady that might be feeling a little bit tight, your muscles are different. They absolutely require different lengths and different surfaces. And so what I love about it is some of the tips are a little bit wider if you have a bigger muscle that you want to go in. But if you have a really thin muscle, you need a sharper point. And that's what we do with our elbows, is we can adjust our pressure in real time and our angles in real time. But there's nothing on the market that can have those small fine-tuned adjustments. And to me, that is everything when it comes to using a myofascial tool. And so we love this product. We're very passionate about it. You know, continue using the things that you love that make you feel better. I'm not saying that you need to stop that, but what I'm encouraging you is to think about going across the tissue is very limited, but going directly into the tissue, holding that tissue stretched. I actually view this therapy as a stretch. We're not stretching lengthwise. We're stretching straight into the tissue. That will have a far more profound effect on changing the muscle. And you need something that will hold and direct that pressure, that has multiple points based on what you need. And so the gumdrop, we believe, really supplies all of that. And it looks like a simple design, but you get in there and you use it and you will absolutely love it.
Kelly, do you want to mention the giveaway?
I sure do. One lucky winner on this call is going to actually get a gumdrop today. Well, not today, but whoever's on this call. So actually, do you want to do it right now?
Yeah, let's do it. And here's one in real time.
In real time. What a cool design. Mimi or Eric, pick a number between 1 and 34.
Go for it, Mimi. I've been talking like crazy.
Let's do 8.
Lucky number 8 on my spreadsheet is Manuel. Where are you at, Manuel? Oh, there he is. Manuel, you won. We'll get your.
Congrats.
Woo!
There are different colors, so you can tell us which one you want. Okay.
That's fun.
First time I won anything in my life.
Woo!
Love it.
All right. We'll keep going, yeah?
Yeah, we keep going. Yeah, so that gives you just a sort of a general, sort of a little snapshot of some of the classes. All of these classes, what's really great, they've all been approved for continuing education. So whether you're a yoga instructor, a Pilates instructor, a massage therapist, an athletic trainer, these have already been approved. We're working on physical therapy. We're actually working on approval from the AMA to get medical credits for these classes because they're at a wide range of levels. So we have very basic classes, so don't feel intimidated by the science. We have basic classes that I believe are at a level where you guys all have a basic understanding, or maybe even a more advanced understanding with a lot of the continuing education that you're getting. So you'll never take this class and say, oh man, I already learned all of this in my certification class. I don't believe that any of this will be taught at that level. I think it will take you guys to the next level. But it won't be too technical. We certainly have very technical classes if you're ready for that. We would love for you to join those classes. I love getting technical because then I can really explain the science. But we have 2 levels of anatomy. So level 1 and level 2, obviously they build upon each other. We have a very dynamic structure, function, and dysfunction class. This class is really geared towards massage therapists and people that want to take a very, very deep dive. This class is probably a little bit more advanced. It moves people through our professional certification program where we actually teach them technique. We have a class wholly and solely dedicated to the science of stretching. I got into a little bit of some of those adaptations. The other adaptations are really, really fascinating. I encourage you, if you're a Pilates instructor or a yoga instructor, take the science of stretching class. It will change your understanding of what you do, and you will be able to better explain those things to your clients. If you're an athletic trainer, we talked a little bit about the ACL and the tendons and the myofascial tissue, how it responds to load and strength training. We take a much, much deeper dive. So if you're an athletic trainer, I absolutely encourage you to take the strength training and fascia class. It'll completely change your understanding of what's happening whenever you bear load on tissue. And if you have a massage therapy license, a physical therapy license, or a chiropractor's license, even a medical license, and you're interested in learning the technique, the other classes are more general education. These, we offer professional certifications in the Delos Therapy technique, but you have to have some type of a license to be able to do body work. So a physical therapy license, chiropractic, or at least a massage therapy license. But all of these general education classes go into the certifications. We're very passionate about this information, and we want to really grow the brand and grow this information. So much of the research is happening in Europe, and we want to be the continuing education providers for all things muscle, all things fascia, whether you're a Pilates instructor, yoga instructor, athletic trainer. I believe that we can have a great impact on your business. And that said, we even have, some business classes so that, and I'll let Mimi take over here in a second, that really focus on the fitness professionals on how can you grow your business? Now you have all of this myofascial information. How can you translate to your clients so that you can grow your business? We've been at this for a long time, and we know the struggles that massage therapists have had to gain clients. We know the struggles that yoga instructors and Pilates instructors have to gain clients and have a really successful career. And a lot of them are working 2 or 3 jobs, and it's very stressful and it's very difficult. We have answers for all of that because we've been in the field for quite some time. So I'll let Mimi take it from here to talk a little bit about the business education.
I'm very mindful of the time, and I will wrap up in a minute so that we can get to all the questions that you guys have. But really, the truth is, I just wanted to give you a sample of some of the classes that will be offered on the business front. And the reason we feel confident in the content is because it's been specifically tailored to fitness and wellness. That's our passion. It's our expertise. So all of these are about business development, even starting your own business. I know I talked to somebody in the breakout session who was starting her own business now that COVID is here. Everything from, selling, which is everybody dreads. We make that fun, but also effective for you. So there will be at least a dozen industry-specific classes on the business front, starting with even the job pursuit. We know a lot of people are looking to stand out these days because jobs are scarce in fitness and wellness. Another example is the pursuit of world-class service. We look at what world-class service really means based on a lot of the research and data that's out there, and actually putting it into a practice for being effective on a daily basis. I don't want to keep going over the time. So Kelly, at this point, I think we're going to let people ask questions.
Yeah, and we already have a few in the chat box, so I will look at those and I can read those off, and then feel free to come off mute or use the chat box, and I'm happy to read off your question. I first wanted to say, like, this was so great, even just this little bit of, you guys just have a wealth of knowledge, and I think it's so important for trainers and just anyone that's interested in taking care of themselves. So thank you both. I'm going to go back. Manuel had a question about kind of from the beginning when you were kind of talking about loss. He said, how long does it take for the loss of flexibility to occur?
I mean, the muscles adapt rapidly, right? So we know whenever we strength train or we start moving, we grow fairly quickly, right? But it's the same thing that happens whenever we're immobile. I would say if you've ever had a time where you're immobile or you get the flu or you get sick and you're in bed for a couple of days, how do you feel when you get up and you start walking around? Your back is stiff. It can happen within days. Or sit at a desk all day at work. The most common area that we treat is the upper back, neck, and shoulders, because people are crammed over a keyboard all day. Those adaptations happen really, really quickly. The problem is people are not moving very frequently for long periods of time, for weeks or months, and then they want to get active. Your body is not acclimated to do that, and now you're much more prone to injury. So it's very important to stay active all the time, vary the movements, do strength training, because your body is adapting every single second of the day.
It's wild. And I think this year we've all been sitting way more than we used to. So it's a good thing to keep in mind to keep our body moving so we don't lose it.
Yep.
Lots of questions about collagen, because you talked a lot about that. Heidi asked, are collagen supplements truly helpful? And I know you kind of touched briefly on that.
Yeah, so collagen supplements, it's a bit of a misnomer. You're not actually ingesting collagen. Collagen is a gigantic molecule that actually can't penetrate the cell membrane. But what we're doing when we take collagen supplements is we're taking the amino acids, or the precursors to collagen. So we're front loading the system and giving the body the amino acids so that when it wants to produce collagen, it has the building blocks. If we're deficient in the building blocks, and we're moving and we're strength training, and we're asking the body to produce collagen, but we don't have the building blocks, it's simply not going to work. So that's why I think collagen supplements are very interesting, because it simply just gives us the tools and the building blocks for our body to do its job. One thing that I think is particularly interesting is the amino acid glycine. So I always tell people, if you had to pick one amino acid to take, I think glycine is very, very important. Glycine and proline are two of the most common amino acids that make up collagen. Glycine is probably about 40 to 50% of the collagen structure. So anytime you have a collagen supplement, make sure it has a high amount of glycine. You can actually buy glycine by itself. It's really, really cheap. It's not expensive. And I think it will build your body, or at least give your body the precursors or the building blocks, so that whenever you do need to produce collagen, you'll have glycine on board. And I always want to talk about, because we actually treat a lot of vegetarians and vegans, and the collagen-based supplements are typically not vegan. because they're harvesting from animal sources. And so what I tell people, you know, if you want to take a collagen supplement, that's fine. If you're vegan or vegetarian, eat chickpeas. Chickpeas have large quantities of glycine, and that will front load your body so that whenever you move or you stretch, your body has the precursors to be able to produce it effectively.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are, you know, kind of confused. I mean, supplements can get confusing in general. So, and then collagen's kind of like the hot thing on the market.
Yep.
So it's really interesting to hear your feedback on that. Gina wanted to ask about, what about hyaluronic acid?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, of course, Gina would ask me that. I have almost an entire class dedicated to hyaluronic acid. It is such a complex molecule. It is so important. It is an absolute hotbed of research right now, trying to figure out what it does, where it's located. I'll give you some of the highlights. So we talked a little bit about the fluidity of fascia. What causes the fluidity of fascia is this layer of water between the layers of fascia. How does the water get there, and what holds it there? So what holds it there is this hyaluronic acid. It's called a hydrophilic substance, meaning it's a water-loving substance. So it gets embedded into your tissue and it holds on to water, and it keeps the water in place. But if you become dehydrated, for example, and you get these fascial adhesions, hyaluronic acid can no longer get into that area. So the tissue will remain stiff. And consuming large amounts of water, a lot of people say, I'm drinking lots of water, but I still feel dehydrated. If the tissues adhere together, nothing can get in there. It's not how much water you drink, it's how much water you absorb. So that's when movement and some type of pressure or shearing force to separate the tissue so that hyaluronic acid can get in there to hold on and to cling into the water. And there's a correct amount of hyaluronic acid. So too little hyaluronic acid could dry out the tissue, but too much hyaluronic acid can actually, they start competing with each other, and it pushes water out. So it has this sort of inverted U-shaped curve in the sense that there's a peak amount that you want. If you don't have too much, it causes stiffness. If you have, or dehydration and stiffness. If you have too much of it, it pushes all of the water out because the hyaluronic acid is binding to each other. It's called macromolecular crowding. It pushes the water out, and that causes a host of other problems too. But hyaluronic acid is a really, really hot topic. It's one of the most important features of fascia, but essentially it's what lubricates and holds on water and keep you moving with fluidity.
And so topical or ingested as a supplement, or both? Your
body produces it naturally.
Got it. Okay.
To create fluidity and hydration within the tissue. So your body is producing it. Now, of course, you look at cosmetically, it's used cosmetically all the time. Hyaluronic acid in creams and probably injections and all kinds of things, because it's so good at holding on water, it plumps the skin. So as we age, we get wrinkles, our skin starts to lose that sort of plumpiness. You can inject hyaluronic acid. The only reason it's doing that is because it has a great way of binding and holding on to water, but your body produces it naturally. But it's very important to keep that tissue with a high level or correct level of hyaluronic acid inside the tissue.
So on this topic, Heidi asked about what can you ingest to have more hyaluronic acid.
Right. Well, I don't know that there's necessarily a pill that you can take that will boost hyaluronic acid levels. I have no doubt somewhere around the world in some pharma group, they're probably developing a drug to do that. What we do know from the research is that there is a cell type, it's called a fasciocyte. So we talked about fibroblasts. A fibroblast produces collagen. A fibroblast responds to pressure. You apply, or strain. You apply pressure to a muscle, a fibroblast will spit out collagen. You apply strain to collagen, meaning weight training, your fibroblast will produce collagen. So we know that our therapy is producing collagen in a healthy rate. There's another cell type, it's called a fasciocyte, that produces hyaluronic acid. And when you look at these layers of fascia, what's really, really interesting, at the bottom of one layer and the top of the bottom layer, there's a layer of fasciocytes that line each one so that it can pump out hyaluronic acid into this space. Now, how do you stimulate a fasciocyte? There's two main ways. Movement, meaning just simply moving, the body's saying, hey, I need to move and lubricate this tissue. The fasciocyte will produce hyaluronic acid. The other thing is a shearing force, so the pulling effect. pulling tissue away. So that's another reason why I'm not a huge fan of foam rolling. Foam rolling is just going straight across the top. If you've had our therapy, to get a little technical, our therapy isn't simply straight pressure. It's actually angular pressure, because what we're doing is we're pulling the superficial layers and applying pressure. What that does is that stimulates the fasciocytes in between these layers to secrete hyaluronic acid to lubricate it. But we also go deeper to stimulate the fibroblasts in that area to lay down new healthy collagen. You simply don't get that by just gliding across the tissue. So I wouldn't think about a supplement or a food that stimulates hyaluronic acid. I would think about movement and shearing forces and some kind of force like Delos Therapy to get the body to produce it naturally.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Back to collagen supplement brands. Any recommendations on that?
I have no recommendation for that. Find one that you feel like works for you. Do your research. I'm sure there's a million out there.
Yeah. Okay. Manuel asked, do you have any trusted resources to help us determine the correct amount of key things like collagen, et cetera, that we need in excess of what our bodies produce naturally?
That's a tough question. You know, I don't know if you can overdo collagen supplements. I have no doubt, you know, I feel like you can probably overdo pretty much anything. I don't know that they've done any kind of dose-dependent studies to show the exact amount of collagen. You know, I can do a little bit of research and see if I can find that number. I don't know if the research is that far along. It may be. It's nothing that I'm fully aware of. I think the manufacturers of these collagen supplements, I'm sort of assuming, which may not necessarily be the right thing to do, is that they're doing the research on what's the proper dose of collagen. So I would sort of follow the recommendations of a leader in the supplement space, do whatever they're saying. They probably have some information on, you know, this is not too much or this is not too little. I would say if you're demanding more of your body, if you're really, really more into strength training and you're loading that tissue, and remember, we get a 3-fold or a 10-fold increase in collagen synthesis. Those people absolutely need more collagen or the precursors of collagen in their body versus someone that's probably doing a little bit more yoga or Pilates. Those aren't very effective for different ways, but they're not straining the tissue like strength training would. So it's probably not one dose for everybody because it depends on your age and it depends on how much you're taxing the system. And you probably need to play around with that a little bit. So, but I wouldn't feel comfortable to say, oh, you need X grams of collagen, because that might be true for one person that's 250 pounds that's lifting weights every day. That's absolutely not true for someone that's 50 years old and is doing Pilates a couple times a week.
Yeah, and do you mind if I ask a follow-up question?
Of course, get after it.
Yeah.
Like the reason I ask is because there's so many times where it's like, you know, find out what worked for you, but it's like, there's no way that I can possibly determine from my body feeling that, oh, this is the right amount of collagen, or like this is the right amount of protein. And there's so many like companies that it's like, oh, you need this, like so much protein, so much whatever, but really we probably make enough protein ourselves. So like things like collagen is like, I'm
with you on that. The amount of protein I think has been pretty well figured out, right? So they've got pretty good
example of like
they're
in general.
Yeah, exactly. But the research on collagen I feel like is pretty new, and I'm not sure that the field is far enough along to be able to say you need this number of grams of proline, this number of grams of glycine. You know, I would say, do you feel stiff? Do you ever have any kind of pain? Can you function without any limitations whatsoever? Can you sleep in any position? Can you do any activity without any limitations? If there's some limitation, there is absolutely a problem with the collagen. And my experience treating patients with collagen abnormality, they feel stiff, they feel weak. I don't think any of that can be reversed with supplements. I don't think any of that can be reversed with food. I used to actually think that. I just think the fibrosis and the changes in the connective tissue take so long and it becomes so deep that a supplement or diet won't fix it. You need something much more than that. So eat a healthy diet, but you know, I would ask yourself, how do you feel on a daily basis? If you feel really, really good, you're probably doing a lot of things right. If you feel any kind of stiffness or any pain at all, you might need to change up the regimen, or, you know, come and talk to somebody like me, and I'd help you to try to find the right solution for you.
All right, maybe we'll talk.
Yep.
All right, it is 3 o'clock, and I feel like we could talk all afternoon, but this has been awesome. 3 o'clock Central. I do want to touch before we go, because I know Allie seems super excited about Delos Institute. Can you give a little bit more information on, and we can send this in the thank you note, like how to find more information about that, what certificates are included, if you want to touch on pricing, or we can go to your website.
Sure, so, absolutely. So delostherapy.com, you will find a tab for Delos Institute specifically. In the email, the follow-up email that you'll send, Kelly, we will actually send a promo code for all the participants today to get $25 credit towards the first class that they take. And those classes will be available. The schedule and pricing, they're going to be available on by Monday at the latest. But we are starting in December. So the first class will actually most likely be December 5th, I believe. And it will be a variety of courses, such as the ones that we've outlined today and some others.
Amazing. Eric and Mimi, this has been incredible. Thank you guys so much. We will follow up with a thank you note on where to find Mimi and Eric to ask more questions, where to find the Institute, and to just learn more. So make sure you follow Delos Therapy on Instagram, and we'll be in touch. Thank you guys so much.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.